Your 15 years here are over, he said, like he was handing me a receipt, not a career execution. First day on the job, and this fresh out of some MBA factory CFO was already swinging his ego around like a kid who just found his dad's toolbox. He didn't even sit down, just strutted in like he owned the oxygen and dropped that line like it was Shakespeare. I stared at him for exactly 3 seconds. That's all it took to catalog his posture: overconfident, his wristwatch too shiny, and the fact that his tie was still factory creased, meaning this man hadn't earned one real day of sweat in this company yet. So I smiled. Real calm, real smooth, and I said, "Good luck with the quarterly reports. Now, if you're just tuning in, take a second to tap that little subscribe button and give this story a like. I know 97% of y'all are listening without subscribing, and hey, no judgment, but it helps more than you know. Keeps our caffeine flowing and the drama coming. Anyway, back to this clown in my office. He blinked like he wasn't expecting anything except tears or maybe a begging speech. I gave him neither. Just gathered my coffee mug, the one with Bite Me and Comic Sans, and dropped it into my banker's box with a grace that comes from surviving 60-hour weeks, 4 ERP migrations, and one full-blown embezzlement scandal that I quietly buried for the good of the company. Security will escort you, he added, gesturing like I might steal a stapler. Sure, I said, just as soon as I log out. I didn't, of course, didn't need to. Everything critical was encrypted, auto-scheduled, and system-bound. My calendar entries were clean. My files, neatly zipped and archived. The real meat of the operation, the forecasting platform, well, that was a different story. No dramatic slow claps or gasps. I wasn't trying to be a martyr or a mystery, I just walked. Past the intern who never looked up from his phone. Past Denise from payroll who mouthed he's going to regret this without even blinking. Past the ficus I'd nursed through 3 winters and 1 roof leak. No exit interview. No farewell email. Just a polite nod at the security guy who looked more embarrassed than I was. I hit the parking lot like a ghost slipping out of its own skin. 15 years. 15 years of late nights with vending machine dinners, budgets held together by my sanity, and annual reviews that called me a quiet asset. Turns out quiet is just corporate for disposable. But disposable doesn't mean gone. Not when the entire financial forecasting system, when they used to make multi-million-dollar decisions, runs on scripts I wrote, databases I built, formulas I designed. Stuff I never documented in any public wiki. Not out of malice, just efficiency. They never asked how it worked. They only asked that it worked. So when Mr. New Money starts swinging his axe without even checking the tree's roots, well, let's just say I left more than my coffee mug behind. I left them something else too, a ticking silence, coded in rows and columns, waiting to speak. And in just a few days, that silence, it was going to scream. The badge clinked softly as I dropped it onto the HR desk. No speech, no drama, just the faint scent of old carpet glue and desperation lingering in the beige hallway like every career that died in this place. Are you sure you don't want to? The HR girl started, clearly rehearsed, clearly new. I cut her off with a look. Not rude, just finished. Nodded and swivel-clicked back to her monitor like she'd never seen me. Give her a year, I thought. She'll either grow a spine or learn to fake smiles with pharmaceutical help. I lifted the single cardboard box I'd packed, no inspirational desk plaques, no framed pictures of fake vacation smiles. Just the Bite Me mug, my wireless mouse, mine, not company issued, and a little origami crane someone folded for me during Q3 hell 3 years ago. It was stupid and I loved it. As I passed accounting, I saw Greg lean out of his cubicle. His eyes flicked from the box to my face, then to the CFO's glass office door. He didn't say anything, but his mouth moved, just a whisper, he's going to regret this. I didn't nod, I didn't even blink, just kept walking, because Greg wasn't wrong, but he also didn't know how wrong the CFO was going to be. Downstairs, the security guy, Raymond, even stand up. He just tilted his head, looked at me for a long second and said, "You good?" "Golden," I said, shifting the box under one arm. The doors hissed open. Sunlight, traffic noise, a woman yelling at someone over a parking spot. Life was still moving. No fireworks, no brass band. Just me, walking away from a building I'd spent 15 years keeping afloat while execs played musical chairs with the C-suite. But see, the thing they never understood, thing none of them wanted to understand, was that those quarterly reports they loved to flash around like PowerPoint pornography, those weren't just Excel exports, they were a symphony. A beast built out of conditional logic, raw data scraping, pattern prediction, and 5 different forecasting algorithms stitched together with digital duct tape and my personal paranoia. No one else even asked how it worked. They just got their pretty graphs and their market projections, slapped them into a slideshow, and called it innovation. I watched the building shrink in my rearview mirror, feeling nothing but calm, not even bitter, just aware. The platform was scheduled to self-lock in 48 hours if no valid credential activity was detected. That wasn't sabotage, that was protocol. My protocol prevents stale data, forces recalibration, and oh yeah, requires biometric confirmation. Mine, and guess what? New CFO never asked for a handoff, never requested admin elevation. He just printed a termination notice, flexed for the org chart, and went back to thinking big. So I drove home, cracked a soda, and opened my laptop. Not to check email, I'd already forwarded anything useful to my personal archive. No, I opened it to see the logs. At 2:43 p.m., IT attempted access to the core model. Result: access denied attempts 3. Reboot trigger initiated. Estimated lockout countdown 47 hours 12 minutes. I smiled, not because I wanted to watch them burn, but because I knew I didn't have to do a damn thing. They fired me thinking I was a cog, but I wasn't the cog. I was the engine. The thing about men like him, the ones who mistake authority for ability, is they think confidence is a substitute for competence. By Monday, he was already booking the executive conference room for Thursday's quarterly board review, puffed up like he'd invented double-entry accounting. He sent out a smug little email, excited to present my first quarterly update, expect streamlined insights and a modernized forecast delivery. Let's raise the bar. Raise the bar? Buddy, you haven't even found the ladder. Meanwhile, deep in the bowels of the server logs, the cracks were forming. IT flagged the main forecasting model twice, once Sunday night and again Monday morning, with vague little alerts like unexpected formula behavior and credential mismatch. They opened a ticket, escalated it to Tier 2, he closed it. Literally hit resolve with no comment. Too busy updating slide templates and Googling synonyms for synergy, I imagine. From my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, I watched the internal chatter trickle into the cloud backup I'd configured for safety redundancy years ago. Not spying, just preventative retention. The alerts were all there in plain text. Forecast model main locked, requires biometric sequence clearance. Backup utility inaccessible, credentials expired. Admin override attempt rejected. The language was dry, but I could hear the panic buried underneath. He was walking blind through a minefield, and tap dancing while he did it. On Tuesday, he called a quick sync with finance to review data trends. Except the data trends weren't trending. They weren't even loading. The interface would flicker, give him a static bar chart from 2 quarters ago, then crash. A junior analyst, bless her terrified soul, raised her hand and said, the formulas seem off. He waved her off with the kind of grin people use to hide the sound of an internal engine fire. Probably just a permissions thing. We've had a lot of legacy stuff floating around. I'll streamline it. Legacy stuff. That's what he called the thing keeping the board from screaming. Every year, that forecasting model took raw sales data, churn metrics, international tax shifts, supplier volatility, and 3 decades of behavioral indicators, and turned it into something the board could digest in 5 bullet points and a pie chart. It didn't just exist, it learned. Now it was locked. Wednesday morning, he copied and pasted a half-baked projection from an old presentation and dropped it into a new deck like nobody'd notice. IT tried again to ping the platform. They got another wall of access denied, and a helpful little subline I'd added after the embezzlement scare of 2019. Contact authorized architect for recalibration protocol. There were only ever 2 authorized architects. One retired in 2020. The other, she was currently baking banana bread and humming to Fleetwood Mac. He still hadn't called, still hadn't even acknowledged anything publicly. But in Slack, whispers were starting. A marketing exec DM'd someone in finance. Why does the main model say her name on it? Another thread lit up. Anyone know how to update the projections? Getting weird errors. The answers came back vague, confused, nervous. No one dared say it aloud yet. But the thing they were all leaning on, all depending on, wasn't leaning back. And I sat there, watching the countdown clock tick closer to 0, feeling something that wasn't quite joy, but sure as hell wasn't regret. Thursday, 7:42 a.m. In the executive conference room, where the walls were glass but the thinking rarely transparent, the CFO was trying to open the forecast model for a final pre-meeting review. His assistant had already placed the tablet in front of him, the projector humming gently, waiting to display months of future-proofed financial clarity to the gods of the boardroom. He tapped, waited, tapped again. The screen went black. Then red text bloomed across the center, loud and unapologetic. Access denied, authorized user, redacted, credential signature, EM. And just like that, the room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. He muttered something under his breath. Probably a curse, possibly a prayer, then jabbed the screen like it owed him rent. The assistant blinked. Is that supposed to happen? He stood up fast, too fast, chair clattered behind him. Get IT, now. Meanwhile, 6 floors away, the IT team had already seen the lockout attempt. Hell, they'd seen 6 of them, 3 from him, 2 from the finance leads, and 1 from someone in marketing who thought maybe refreshing the dashboard would fix everything. Spoiler, it didn't. Senior IT manager, Rachel, whom I trained back when she still thought pivot tables were actual furniture, typed a command, waited, and said no dice. Encryption is ironclad. We can't bypass it without a full wipe. A wipe? Asked one of the suits who'd wandered down, clearly hoping someone would just unplug and replug the economy. Rachel nodded. Yeah, we'd lose 12 years of historical model behavior, metadata, macro logic, basically everything that makes this more than just a spreadsheet. Back upstairs, the CFO took a long, deep breath and smiled through it like he was still in control of the steering wheel, despite the fact the car was now on fire and headed for a cliff. It's a minor glitch, he told the room full of executives arriving early. Just some outdated permissions. Happens all the time in legacy systems. Legacy. There's that word again. Like it was my middle name and not his lifeline. He started flipping through a backup presentation built on guesswork, gut feeling, and sheer ego, all while trying to casually mute his phone every time IT pinged him with another failed override attempt. And me? I was sitting on my porch, sipping my second coffee of the morning and watching my neighbor try to parallel park for the fourth time. Laptop open. VPN active. Logs streaming in. Each failed login attempt pinged like a polite little doorbell from across the city. 7:42 a.m. Unauthorized credential 7:43 a.m. Multi-factor validation failure 7:45 a.m. Admin override blocked, biometric mismatch. The best part? Each time the system rejected them, it logged the device ID and attached a delightful time-stamped header. Escalation path, EM. Only they could see my name, stamped clean across the denial notice like a digital middle finger with a touch of Helvetica. I took a bite of toast, chuckled, and watched the birds fight over a bagel someone had dropped on the sidewalk. Chaos outside, chaos inside, perfect harmony. Back at headquarters, someone finally dared to ask who built this thing again? Silence. The CFO clenched his jaw. We're handling it, sure. He hadn't called, still hadn't reached out, still spinning his narrative like the problem was the software, not the fact that the woman who designed it now had a front row seat to his unraveling. And the board meeting? Less than 90 minutes away. Tick, tock, enjoy the show. 9:02 a.m. The boardroom smelled like expensive leather, nervous sweat, and the kind of desperation you only see when rich people realize their money might not be multiplying on schedule. The quarterly meeting had officially started. The coffee was poured, the donuts were untouched, and the screen behind the CFO still screamed, access denied, authorized user, EM. The same two red lines had been blinking for the past 34 minutes. Where are the projections? Asked Franklin, one of the older board members with a voice like he'd been drinking gravel since the 80s. We're sitting on 3 pending acquisitions. I need those numbers. The CFO, slick with performance anxiety but trying to hold composure like a rented tuxedo, forced a chuckle. Minor hiccup. We're experiencing some short-term tech issues with our legacy forecasting tools. I'll walk you through some provisional data I've compiled. He clicked to the next slide, a Frankenstein bar chart that looked like it had been built in PowerPoint by a caffeinated raccoon. This isn't the model, said someone else flatly. It wasn't a question. No, he admitted. We've got our team working on it. The actual file, well, it's temporarily inaccessible. Why does it say her name? Asked a venture partner dialing in from a Cayman villa. He zoomed in on the shared screen like he was reading an arrest warrant. Silence. The CFO swallowed. Emily Morgan. She built the original system. I've been in the process of untangling some outdated security protocols. Outdated, that's cute. From my kitchen, I stirred my oatmeal. Logged into the shadow node, which was still pinging override attempts every 6 minutes like a metronome for corporate failure. I clicked into the CFO's mobile activity log. He just called Linda from operations, then Greg in supply chain. Then even Pam in HR, mid-level manager after mid-level manager. Fishing, trying to be discreet. Hey, do you have her number? Have you heard from Emily? Could you maybe, check in on how she's doing? Texts were even worse. Hi, hope you're well. Quick thing, any chance you can reconnect us with Emily? She might have some helpful insight. One guy even sent, we'd really appreciate her input. Just until we're through this bottleneck. Totally informal bottleneck, that's what they were calling it. Meanwhile, I was polishing off my oatmeal and starting a jigsaw puzzle I'd been putting off since 2021. No rush, let them sweat. Back in the boardroom, the CEO's face had gone tight. That signature expression where you can tell he's doing mental math between damage control and headhunting. So you're telling us, he said, leaning forward, that our entire predictive forecast system, which informs our supply orders, hiring decisions, investment timing, and Q4 budget alignment, is currently inaccessible because the only person who could access it was terminated without a transition plan? The CFO hesitated. It was an oversight, and she hasn't been contacted. Another hesitation. I thought it best not to escalate without protocol. One of the board members muttered, we are protocol. Phones started vibrating. Whispered side conversations erupted like popcorn. Get her on the line. Do we even have her number? Did legal sign off on her termination? Why wasn't this flagged before the meeting? The CFO stood there, jaw tight, hands folded like a priest asking God to reschedule Judgment Day. And I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in my pajamas, putting together the corner pieces of a seascape puzzle and letting my phone vibrate silently across the counter. Because I wasn't ignoring them out of spite. I was ignoring them out of design. Control isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible, like a lever no one notices until you take your hand off it and the machine stops turning. And the machine was very much stopped. By 10:37 a.m., the CEO had heard enough whispers to start a storm. He'd spent the last hour sitting stone still at the head of the table, watching the CFO spin a second-rate circus of half slides, recycled talking points, and buzzwords duct taped to speculation. But the moment his phone buzzed with a message from legal, subject line, no documentation found, forecast system ownership, he stood up without a word and walked out of the boardroom. The board followed with their eyes. A few exchanged looks. One leaned to another and whispered, "He fired the wrong person." That phrase would echo like a funeral bell down the hallways for days. In his office, the CEO didn't pace, didn't shout. He just stared out the window with his jaw tight, watching a landscaping crew dig decorative trenches while the company's own forecast infrastructure lay 6 feet under. He called IT. "Tell me exactly who has access to the forecasting system," he said. A pause. Then the IT director, voice strained but precise. "Only one user profile is authorized to unlock or recalibrate the system's predictive engine. All other accounts are view-only or dependent on admin shadowing. And that user is Emily Morgan. Her profile is still listed as primary architect. Fingerprint encrypted. Two-factor tied to her personal keychain. No backups, no secondary. Silence. We tried a sandboxed override," the director added. "It bricked the simulation model and flagged a corruption warning. So we can't even fake the forecast?" the CEO asked. "No, sir, we'd be running blind." He ended the call, sat down slowly, and stared at the phone like it might grow legs and walk away to avoid being blamed. He pulled up her old employee file. The last note on her record: quiet, reliable, systems-minded, tends to hoard responsibilities, recommend delegation training. Below it, the CFO's termination signature, timestamped 4 days ago. He hit the internal line, "Get me her number, personally." Meanwhile, I was painting my toenails, not for vanity, for peace. The sun was warm through the living room windows. My inbox had started to quietly buzz with LinkedIn pings from old colleagues who'd suddenly remembered I existed. Subject lines like, "Hope you're well. Quick cue thinking of you, do you have a sec?" Greg even sent a gif of a dumpster fire with the caption, "Guess what they're watching in the boardroom today?" I laughed out loud. Then I logged into the node, checked the access logs again. Nothing had changed. Same failed attempts, same red locks. But now the metadata had a new entry, query flagged, user dependency structure M accessed by CEO. There it is, I thought. He finally looked under the hood. Because for 15 years, no one wanted to know how the sausage got made. They just wanted charts, projections, trend lines with polite curves. But now that the chef was gone and the kitchen was burning, now they were interested. And I knew my value had never been higher. I could hear the questions piling up like invoices on a broken printer tray. Why didn't we clone her access? Why was there no disaster recovery protocol? Who approved her termination without a knowledge transfer? Answers were simple: because I did everything, and no one ever asked how. Now they needed me, not as a cog, not as Emily from finance, but as the keystone holding up the whole damn cathedral. My phone lit up, private number. I smiled and let it ring twice. Then 3 times. Bargaining power peaks in the silence before the call is answered. It was just after 8 p.m. The kind of quiet that hums, dishwasher sloshing in the kitchen, wind brushing the curtains, the occasional creak of an old house remembering you live inside it. I was halfway through a glass of wine, feet up, blanket over my lap when the phone rang. No caller ID. Just that sterile gray glow of a blocked number that only ever means one of two things: spam or someone finally swallowing their pride. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then I answered, a pause, breathing. Then Emily. The voice was low, controlled, tired in a way that said too many hours, too many egos, and one very big mistake. It was the CEO. "I know this isn't protocol," he said, "but protocol isn't working right now." "No kidding, the board is still here, they've been waiting. And the only thing we can pull up from the forecasting model," he exhaled, "is your name. In red, with 2 words underneath, access denied." He paused again. "Explain." I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. A neighbor was walking their dog. The street lamp made the sidewalk glow like an old postcard. Then I said calmly, "That depends." Another pause. "On, do you want a short-term fix or a permanent solution?" He was quiet, not the defensive kind of quiet, the calculating kind. The kind where you can hear the exact second someone realizes they're not holding the reins anymore. "I'm listening." I took a sip of wine. Let the silence stretch again, not to be petty, not to be cruel, just to give gravity the space it needed. "Your CFO made a call without due diligence. You trusted him to streamline what he didn't understand. And now your company is flying blind into Q4 with 3 pending acquisitions and no verified financial trajectory." More silence. This one had weight behind it. "Emily," he said finally, "just tell me what it takes." There it was, the shift from command to request. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the dog sniffing at a storm drain. The night was quiet, but I could feel the heat of 20 boardroom eyes in another part of the city waiting on my voice like it was oxygen. "No more under-the-table nonsense," I said. "No intermediaries, no discreet outreach. You want this fixed? We do it right, official, documented, and clean." And he asked, "I'll need full reinstatement. Same title, same system authority. But this time I report directly to you. No CFO in my chain of command. No interference." He didn't argue. "And compensation?" I smiled. "We'll discuss a performance clause. One that reflects my actual value, not just what HR thinks the market says I'm worth." A pause, then surprisingly a soft chuckle. Fair enough, I could hear chairs scraping in the background. People murmuring. Maybe someone reading lips. Maybe someone realizing for the first time that the most powerful person in the company wasn't even in the building. Emily, he said again, quieter now. Thank you for taking the call. I didn't do it for you. And I hung up, calm, still barefoot, still holding the wine. Because sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it sips Cabernet and lets the world come knocking. The next morning, I didn't rush. No triumphant strut. No dramatic heels echoing off marble floors. Just slacks, a dark sweater, and a calm walk through the lobby like I'd never left. Because in the ways that mattered, I hadn't. The receptionist froze when she saw me, eyes wide like a ghost had wandered in for a meeting. Is someone expecting you? I gave her a kind smile. They are now. The elevator ride was quiet, just me and the hum of corporate tension tightening by the second. Floor 23, executive level, open like a wound. The hallway buzzed with whispers, phones to ears, assistants moving like they were dodging sniper fire. When I stepped into the boardroom, the energy snapped like an overstretched rubber band. The CFO was already seated at the far end of the table, pale as printer paper, hands clenched around a legal pad he hadn't written a damn thing on. His jaw twitched when he saw me. No greeting, just avoidance. Like eye contact might trigger a stroke. The CEO stood. Thank you for coming, I nodded, set down my laptop and clicked it open without fanfare. A projector hummed to life behind me, screen bathing the room in a clean, pale glow. I won't waste your time, I said, voice steady, clear. You're here because the forecasting system failed to load. It didn't crash, it wasn't a bug. It did exactly what it was designed to do. Click. A diagram appeared, complex, layered, but readable. Like the inner workings of a safe. This system isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a living architecture of predictive modeling. It ingests 12 categories of dynamic inputs across 5 departments, weights them against historical performance, and adjusts based on external market volatility pulled from 3 real-time APIs. Click. This, I pointed to a red square on the diagram, is the security protocol. Built after the 2019 internal breach, where someone tried to falsify Q2 numbers to inflate performance bonuses. Boardroom murmurs. I was asked to ensure it wouldn't happen again, so I did. That protocol encrypts the core logic and binds it to biometric credentials. Mine, because I was the only one trained to recalibrate it without risk of data contamination. The room was silent. No coughs, no pen clicks. Just the gentle hum of an empire realizing its heartbeat came from someone they let walk out with a cardboard box. Click. I pulled up the audit log. 17 failed access attempts, timestamps, device IDs, and the final red banner they all saw yesterday morning. Access denied authorized architect. EM, then I turned to face them. I didn't lock you out. You did that when you removed me without a handoff, without credential transition, and without so much as a knowledge capture session. This wasn't sabotage, it was negligence. Someone near the center of the table said, low and sharp, who authorized her termination. All heads swiveled. The CFO looked like he was melting. He started, voice dry as chalk. It was a standard restructuring. I was told to streamline. No, you weren't, the CEO said, voice suddenly sharp. That was never authorized at the board level. You didn't even brief me. Another board member leaned forward. So you cut the architect of our entire forecasting infrastructure to streamline. The CFO tried to shift the blame like he was passing a hot potato with no hands. She never documented her system clearly. She held on to access. I cut him off. Calmly. There were 2 internal requests in the last 5 years to document the full architecture. Both times I offered to train a successor. Both times the request was dropped for more urgent priorities. I have the emails, click, inbox receipts, time-stamped, chain of command, all of it. No one defended him. The CEO finally broke the silence. This is done. The CFO's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like he'd forgotten how to breathe without authority. He didn't speak. He just stood, gathered his untouched pad, and walked out under the fluorescent lights like a man realizing the fall doesn't kill you, the landing does. I turned back to the table. So I said calmly, shall we talk about restoring access? And every single head nodded. CFO didn't even make it out of the hallway. Before the board could move on, the CEO stepped to the door and called after him, voice sharp as broken glass. Actually, Paul, one more thing. The whole room went still. The CFO turned, already wilting, his suit suddenly too big for the man inside it. You're done, the CEO said, voice even but final, effective immediately. No theatrics, no shouting. Just the cold, corporate bullet to the brain. Paul blinked, lips parting like he might argue, but then he saw the legal counsel already walking into the room with a beige envelope and a paper-clipped folder. The board didn't flinch. No protests, no sympathy. He left with nothing but the faint squeak of his loafers against the tile and a silence so thick it might have had mass. The CEO closed the door and turned to me. I believe we owe you a proper conversation. I nodded, laptop still open, cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. We'd like to offer reinstatement, he said. Senior role, title of your choosing, significant compensation increase. A board member chimed in, and no CFO in your way, direct reporting line to the CEO. Another added, whatever resources you need to document, train, or scale the system, you get them. No questions asked. I looked around the table. The same people who once called me quiet, reliable, low maintenance, the ones who used to skim past my slide decks to get to the prettier charts. Now, they weren't just looking at me, they were waiting. I clicked a few keys. The projector screen flickered, then filled with soft, familiar blue. The dashboard loaded seamlessly. Charts bloomed like spring after frost. Revenue arcs, churn curves, expense deltas, all where they should be. Alive, accurate, awake. The board exhaled in unison like a single organism. And I, still calm, still steady, closed my laptop with a soft click and walked to the empty seat at the head of the table. My seat now. I placed the laptop in front of me, smoothed the crease on my sleeve, looked around at the most powerful people in the company, all staring like I'd just raised the Titanic, and smiled. Let's get those quarterly reports done, shall we? No cheers, no applause, just heads nodding. Respect earned, not gifted. And inside, not gloating, not raging, just that deep, quiet satisfaction of everything falling exactly into place. They had tried to erase me. Now I was the only name that mattered. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.